Well, we're about halfway done with the series, so let's move on to Phase 2. With the success of the first two Iron Men, it's only natural that this is what starts Phase 2. And let me tell you, this was a great way to start. Iron Man 3 rivals the first movie on enjoyability, but for an entirely different reason. The change from Jon Favreau to Shane Black is very apparent, and I feel worked really well in taking on this new aspect of the characters we've already grown to love. The direction this movie takes feels a lot more centered on every character, making it feel a lot more personal than Iron Man 2 tried to do. Here I felt every character had a journey to take. Everyone was motivated and acted purely from that motivation. Unlike Iron Man 2, where I feel like all the characters just didn't grow at all. This is definitely the tightest script that Iron Man films have had so far, feeling like a mix somewhere in the middle of the maturity of the Incredible Hulk and the quick-witted nature of the Avengers. Oh, and the action. Hot damn, the action. This takes a really fun fish-out-of-water approach to it, by actually having a lot of the action not revolving around an Iron Man suit. Instead, Stark using his own know-how in order to get through, which I feel really helped change the pace of all the action. Every aspect of this movie made the characters more relatable and made the journey more fun. It also had a great ending for Tony Stark as a character, with the arc that started in the first Iron Man ending here. The only problem I had was really the fact that it took place in a post-Avengers world. S.H.I.E.L.D. right now is shown to protect against stuff like Extremis, and I couldn't help but feel like S.H.I.E.L.D. would get involved when the President of the United States would be taken hostage. I would expect Captain America or someone to show up when something like this happens, especially when something like Extremis is involved giving people superpowers. Other than that, I feel like it was incredible movies and another one of my favorites in the MCU. 9 out of 10.
For a meaningful death.
It's a good thing Marvel decided to rely on Iron Man 3 to kickstart Phase 2, especially since Thor Dark World struggled to hold me in any way. It's really sad when you have two movies named after you and you end up becoming the least developed and least interesting character that the universe has to offer. When I watch this movie, I care so much about everyone else. Jane Foster, Eric Selvig, Odin, everyone except for Thor himself. Honestly, one character absolutely steals the show, and that is Loki. Half the movie is you waiting for Loki to have more screen time, and the second half is wondering why Loki wasn't more in the first half. Tom Hiddleston gives so much to the role that you can tell he's just having the time of his life. When the movie explores the bonds and relationships of the characters, it's honestly pretty interesting. And then it falls apart when it focuses itself on the action and the set pieces because they aren't as interesting as they should be. The final fight's a bit better than the one in the original Thor because of its reliance on practical sets rather than CG spectacle. Even though the movie does still have a lot of those, they feel a lot more toned down, so it does feel a bit more real. It does a lot to set up the other films in the universe while not having the most interesting story for itself. The one thing that this movie lacks compared to the others in the MCU is a semblance of self-awareness. The others know that they're supposed to be fun, so they make it fun. While for this, the only person I feel really cares to breathe life into this melodramatic piece of crap is Loki, probably with the help of Joss Whedon literally being airlifted on set for reshoots. Overall, this is what I feel is the weakest film not only of Phase 2, but the entire MCU series. The only reason to watch this film is for Loki, as he's the highlight of the film. This gets a 4 out of 10.
Anyone else?
Captain America Winter Soldier is what a lot of people consider to be the best film in the entirety of the MCU. I don't know if I'd say that, but I don't know if I'd go that far, but I will say it's the most grounded and realistic film of the universe. It follows Captain America living in the modern day, attempting to adjust to his new life. He is now an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. who he doesn't entirely trust. The beginning of the movie is honestly really nice and heartfelt. It really grounds the world into reality. The PTSD support group, Cap with a list of stuff to catch up on, the meeting with Agent Carter with Alzheimer's, it's all heartbreakingly real. It really makes you feel for the character. The film then goes on to be a great action thriller with twists and turns continuing throughout its story. It's the most emotionally involved I got into the story of these films. Especially when you compare it to the first Avenger, the camp factor that the original film had is just gone. It makes the film just hit that much harder with the realism. But the movie isn't without weakness. The introduction of Bucky as the Winter Soldier is one that should be an emotional punch to your tiny little heartstrings, especially with how much Captain America has already had on his plate. But the story beat doesn't work as well in this film as it should because of the first one. The friendship to me was never strong in the first movie. In the first Avenger, Bucky was a plot device for Cap. Twice. He never had a character outside of best friend support guy. We never had a personal moment between them as characters. More Bucky just trying to hold Steve Rogers back. But I will admit that this movie makes me feel more for their friendship than the first one ever did. So by the end of it, I was feeling what the movie wanted me to feel since the very beginning, only it took about an hour and a half. I love this movie and I can see why it's so highly regarded. I would also just recommend watching this because most of it still works as a standalone movie. It's just better with the context of the first film. This gets an 8 out of 10.
Damn right.
You know, technically I already reviewed this one and you can see what my initial reaction was if you click this link here. Go on. I can wait. After another viewing of the movie, I'm still happy to say that most of what I said before still applies. And now with this marathon of seeing every movie in order, it's just amazing just how different it is from everything else. While in your mind it's easy to say that all of these movies are just the same, each director does really have a way to make each film stand out. And Guardians does it to the nth degree. What makes it really work well is the fact that it isn't bogged down by the rest of the MCU, making it feel like its own thing. Thanos is such a minuscule part of the overall series that his glorified cameo in here feels like this is the first time we're being introduced to him. Chris Pratt is the strongest actor that this movie has, being an absolute joy to watch on screen. Most of the gripes I have with this movie are very small, like how the end of the movie does that whole Marvel thing of setting up everything else rather than being content with ending the movie without a tease. Like with Drax, the entire movie was setting up how much he hated Ronan, the main villain of the movie, before at the very last minute going like, yeah, but Thanos is voice. It invalidates his entire role in the movie for the sake of trying to make Thanos seem like Space Hitler, something that the movie already did earlier and has already been established since the first Avengers. Most of those kind of moments are always isolated to the end of the movie, making the rest just an absolute blast. I'll stand by my original rating, an 8 out of 10.
We're the frickin' Guardians of the Galaxy.
I'm with them.
Oh boy, another giant Avengers romp! Can it top how amazing the first one was? No. No, it can't. As a straight sequel to Avengers, it works out pretty well, following the story almost immediately after the first one, with everyone attempting to find Loki's scepter. The problem with this? Well, as you can tell by how many films I've reviewed before doing this one, this can't be a straight sequel to Avengers, as much as it wants to be. So much has happened to our characters since the last Avengers, and this movie kind of invalidates the journeys they've taken. Like Tony Stark still being Iron Man despite seeming like he was done with it in Iron Man 3. Captain America aiming to find Bucky above all else is just kind of tossed to the side in a single line with Falcon. Hydra essentially taking over S.H.I.E.L.D. and Winter Soldier only to be killed off screen. Stuff like that just kind of makes me say, what happened to the story of this movie? So much seems to be different than the last time we saw all these characters that it just kind of feels weird or rushed. The opening of the movie makes it seem like it's the end of Hydra, who for all intents and purposes were set up to be the main villains of the rest of the MCU. Seeing Stark take up the role of Iron Man again is honestly weird. I would have preferred him doing stuff behind the scenes like acting like the Avengers' own Alfred. Yeah, Batman vs Superman did one thing right. One thing! But instead he seems to throw away the lessons he learned in Iron Man 3. Other than blatantly ignoring the character development, this movie still manages to have some pretty good moments. It still has all those Joss Whedon-esque moments, but where the first Avengers felt like a culmination of everything that the universe has, this feels more procedural, feeling the need to set up everything for the next movies rather than telling its own story. Like when Thor leaves the plot for 20 minutes to set up Thor Ragnarok. There's a lot less fun being had in this movie, and it doesn't feel as tight as the other ones. That doesn't make everything about the movie terrible, though. The action, of course, is on point and awesome. Ultron himself is also a really awesome villain that I just love to follow. Just like Loki, you feel for him. You feel bad for him. He is a sympathetic villain. He isn't entirely rational, he's just doing what he feels is right. I was hung on every word that his character said because I was so interested in everything that he had to say. Even the twins are really awesome characters. This version of Quicksilver is a much better character than the one in Days of Futures Past, even though that film did have better sequences than this one. When I first watched this movie in theaters, I was confused why this film didn't stick with me the way the first one did. But with this viewing, it does become more apparent that a lot of what made the first film a giant powerhouse just isn't put into this one. The hype behind it, the build-up, all of it wasn't there. It was just sadly another Marvel film. Is it worth a watch? Well, of course, it's still the Avengers. It just isn't as magnificent as the first one. 7 out of 10.
That's the best you can do!
Gotta.
Well, that's every film from Phase 2. Tune in next time and what? One more? How? The Avengers just happened. Wait, Ant-Man came out the exact same summer? What? Ant-Man, as I'm sure most of you already know, has a very infamous production history. Originally being written and directed by Edgar Wright, this film was already getting hyped up since before the MCU was really getting big. It wasn't going to take place in the universe at all, it was just going to be its own movie. And then the first Iron Man happened, and the Avengers started becoming and Marvel just wanted to use the character for Avengers. Edgar Wright spent a lot of time rewriting the script to fit it with the MCU, but eventually Marvel just fired him and replaced him because his vision was far too different. Now that isn't saying that the movie isn't good. quite the opposite actually. It's honestly fun and pretty awesome, but there are so many parts of the script that just don't mesh with the rest of it. There are a lot of hilarious quick moments that you can tell were written by Edgar Wright, but the tone of the movie doesn't always hit its mark. A lot of the scenes feel forced in and don't balance well with the rest of the script. Like when the film goes out of its way to describe how disastrous the quantum realm is. Like 2 full scenes are dedicated to how it's an end-all be-all, but then Scott just fixes it like that. Or how they always mention how the Pym particle affects the brain chemistry, but we never see that. We're just told it happens. The movie at its best is like a superhero heist film. But at its worst, it's just another cliche superhero origin story where everything happens to work itself out. While it's funny, it's far from my favorite of the films. You can tell that there was a lot of studio reworking of the script, and it's the only time I would say it actually hurt the film. Some of the moments you can tell are forced in there are kinda cool, with like the fight with Falcon, but others just seem forced, like the whole going subatomic thing. This is a fun movie, but not one I would say you would have to watch right away. This gets a 6 out of 10.
I'm Ant-Man. I know. Wasn't my idea.
Well, that's the end of the entirety of the MCU, and Captain America is going to be the start of a whole new marathon. And I'll see you guys later for when I review Captain America: Civil War.